Good morning, students. Today is September the 10th, 2020, in the year of COVID. And today we're going to start our lecture with Teotihuacan or Teotihuacan, the birthplace of the gods for the Aztec and other civilizations of Mexico. Remember that a lot of these civilizations overlap, so it doesn't necessarily mean that uh, while Teotihuacan was being built, there was nothing else going on in Mexico. But let's start with Teotihuacan. Uh, Teotihuacan, at its peak, was the largest city in the Americas. It was also considered to be one of the largest cities in the world at the time. Okay, it influenced all of Mexico. Okay, that means that while Teotihuacan was thriving, you had other civilizations in Mexico that were also thriving as well, and you had civilizations like the Maya and some remnants of the Olmec left over, and of course you may have had some Zapotecos and Mixtec and Totonacas and Otomis that were also thriving and would come in and out of the Teotihuacanese empire. They influenced all of Mexico. The ethnicity of the city was uncertain. Okay, it was a fairly diverse city. We know that perhaps maybe some Nahuas or Motomi or Totonacas were there, but one of the things that we can say is that it was a multi-ethnic city. The foundation was right around 300 before Common Era. So as you can see, there is going to be some overlap with the Maya, and a lot of us believe that the major people that were in Teotihuacan were the Totonaca, and that they were artisans. Okay, um, and then later on, the Toltec came in. The Toltec were not as artisanal; they were more warlike in a sense, but we believe that they came afterwards, and we believe that the Totonac were actually allowed Zapotecos and Mixtecos and Maya to join the civilization. They were pretty tolerant. They were pretty open-minded with all of that diversity. Now, some of the things that we can see here is that their peak was right around 450. This civilization was only lasted about 700 years. As you can see, it's 1,000 Common Era to 800 Common Era, and the foundation was right around 300 years before Common Era. But its peak was, between 100 and 800. Uh, One of the things that we can see is that it was a civilization that did thrive. They had anywhere between 150,000 to 250,000 inhabitants. They also built taubs or tables, tableros, okay? It's an architectural design that is still seen in Mexico today, okay? Even some of the smaller pyramids were in a tablero type of arrangement, okay? Now, one of the things that the Aztec do is that they everything that that the Toltec, I mean the Toltec, the Totonaca did in Teotihuacan, the Aztec repeat it. They say the story that they gave us is the correct story of how Teotihuacan was built. Now, with that said, uh, they're the ones that build the Avenue of the Dead, and they're the ones that more than likely built the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. Okay, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon were not built by the Aztec. They were more than likely built by Totonacas during the Teotihuacan period. Okay, and that's when we begin to see the emergence of ritualistic sacrifices that we see later on in the Aztec Empire. We see a lot of similarities to the gods dating back to Olmec and Maya, and you see a combination of that. However, sacrifices were done, but they were not done for the gods for the most part. They were done in the dedication of buildings. Um, during the Teotihuacan period. Now, the collapse begins between 7 and 800. Many people believe that the city was just sacked and burned by hordes of bandits that were probably Apaches or Comanches or something like that were coming from northern Mexico and southern United States that were coming down. And they just got tired of the ruling class having a bunch of money. And they just said, you know what, we're not going to tolerate this under any circumstances. And, raping and pillaging became a commonplace at this time between 7 and 800, between the 7th and the 8th century. Uh, One of the things that's really ironic is that you see that a lot of this destruction that happened really only happened to the buildings of the ruling class. I think today I'm going to go get me a podcast microphone because these headphones kind of wear on me after a while. I'm sorry I had to say that right now, but anyway, um, we begin to see a lot of looting and of the temples and of the luxury dwellings. That's what they begin to see. And some of the nicer cities, as Cochicalco and Tula, are sacked. A lot of people also think that there may have been a famine after a volcanic eruption in El Salvador in 535 Common Era, and you have a cloud of dust that will not allow individuals to um, plant and grow consumable items and stuff like that. Okay, uh, let's move on to the Mixtec, los Mixtecos, start by saying that the Mixtec are famous for their really good-looking, really fancy jewelry of turquoise and gold. They lived in the present-day states of Oaxaca, Puebla, Guerrero, and their primary language was Otomaguean. Very little is known about these people, and I think that because of their ability to move in and out of other tribes, uh, they kind of got lost in other tribes. Maybe that's why they call them Mixtecos. We do know that they flourished after Teotihuacan, like 900, 940 to 1500 Common Era. About 1300, the Mixtec took over control of ceremonial side of Montalban in the present day city of Oaxaca. They took it away from the Zapotecos and they ruled it for about 12 centuries. The who I'm sorry, who the Zapotec had ruled for 12th century. So here's a very good example of overlap. The Zapotecos had been in Montalban for 12 centuries, so that's 1,200 years. So that goes back into the formative period of the Maya, okay, and then it of course encompasses the whole period of the Teotihuacan period and goes into the period. It goes into a little bit of the period of the Aztec period because by the time that the Mixtec begin to decline, as the Zapotec begin to decline, you begin to see the rise of the Aztec Empire. So there's a little bit of overlap there with each one of these. Um, right around the 10th century or 1000, you begin to see kingdoms established. You begin to see stratified classes of nobles, artisans, and peasants. Many of the Mixtec live close to the Aztec, close that many of the Mixtec that Mixtec that lived close to the Aztec would pay tribute to the Aztec, so the Aztec wouldn't attack them. Okay, so some of them became vassals, but not all of them became vassals. They were very resistant to the Aztec. Okay, and the Aztec were not able to conquer the Mixtec until the Spanish came. So the Spanish came and conquered the Aztec, and then the Aztec and the Spanish together conquered the Mixtec. Okay. Now, information on the Mixtec is quite sparse. They seem to migrate to other areas of Mexico. They're actually still um, a very good contingency of Mixtec or Mixtecos that live now, and they can be found anywhere from Southern California to New York City. Okay, The largest communities of Mixtecos are in Arizona. Um, about about 180,000, 200,000 live in the United States. Okay, so there's still a lot of Mixtecos out there, and I think that one of the reasons that they were able to preserve their bloodlines was the fact that they would allow themselves to blend in with other cultures, uh, and not completely be wiped out. They're known for their wax cast jewelry, uh, and their textiles. Okay, after conquest, they make really good clothes. You know, you see Mixteco clothes that is woven tapestries and a lot of vibrant colors. And in addition to that, you will see jewelry that is cast out of wax cast. I'm sorry, wax castings, and there's a picture of them in your notes. One of the greatest Mixtec dynasties was Tilantongo, and established with the marriage of two nobles. This is just anecdotal material. Uh, they had a really strange way of calling themselves, like Lord Eight Deer, also known as Eight Deer Jaguar Claw. Um, uh, the reason that we have such a hard time with Mixtec history is that only very few, or very not a very large amount of documents exists from them. I think we have 8 or 10, and that in itself creates some problems as well. You know, but I'm certain to say that there are probably some among us, or I've had students who are descendants of the Mixtec. Okay, let's start with the Aztec. I do want to apologize for my lack of enthusiasm this morning. It's a cool morning, and I'm a little sluggish. I had a big breakfast. My wife brought me a hamburger for breakfast, so I had kind of like a big breakfast there, and it's kind of cold. So I'm kind of sluggish, you know, but anyway, yeah, we'll get through this in a bit. Here, we'll be done. Now, the Aztec Empire flourished from 1300 to 1521. It's actually only like 220 years. They actually did some establishment prior to that, but not really. The Aztec were probably there. They have a lot of Apache. They may even be have some Comanche bloodlines in them, or they may be a different kind of Comanche or Apache. Um, they probably came down from Colorado, and they were coming from northern Mexico, traveling south, looking for, you know, the land that they were supposed to inhabit. And this is where they come upon the eagle and the serpent, that is now on the Mexican flag. Aztec simply means people of Aztlan, and Aztlan uh, is a mythical city or a mythical country that is really from like Mexico City all the way north to Texas and Arizona. It doesn't serve, the name Aztlan does not serve to understand the complexity of the Aztec. Okay. Um, uh, it's just this, because the Spanish destroyed so much, we really don't know. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm descendant of the Aztec," or "I'm descendant of this." It's very hard to know that. You're more likely, more accurate to say, "Hey, I'm a descendant of the Mixtec," than you are to say that you are a descendant of the Aztec. Okay, they were Amerindian tribes, like I said before, and they're looking for a mystical land. They are make up three city states: Aletepel and the area of Tenochtitlan, Mexica, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. Okay, and that's really four, but they're really Tenochtitlan and Mexica were one, and then you had Texcoco and Tlacopan that made up the other two. So it was known as three big city states. Okay, they had their first emperor right around 1325, and the royal dynasty of I can't ever say his name well. The guy's name is Acampichitli. He was elected by the first Way Tlantolani of Tenochtitlan, and it's just like a council, okay? Uh, their last great uh, king was Moctezuma, Sokoyosin. Uh, Now remember, Moctezuma II was the one that repelled the Spanish after he was betrayed by Doña Malina or La Malinche. That's why when you are not, when you betray somebody, they call you a Malinchista. They resisted for 2 years before he was killed by either the Spanish or somebody that opposed the Mexica, and they went ahead and they killed him after they tortured him. And there was a big massacre at the Gran Templo, okay, Mayor. Uh, but that is a story for another day. I'm just trying to give you a basic understanding. If any of you ever attend the university and have a chance to take a class on, Mexican indigenous cultures, I really strongly suggest that you do make an attempt to take it. You may be able to take a class just on the Aztec, but I think those are going to fall under anthropology or they're going to fall under sociology, usually not history. We have other um, emperors there. We have Cuitlahuac that only ruled for 80 days and he died of smallpox. And he is the one that takes part in La Noche Triste. 1520 to 1521 was Cuauhtemoc. A lot of people name their children Cuauhtemoc under which is the last Aztec emperor, and he fiercely resisted. Once they captured him, they burned his feet, and they poured lead down his throat, molten lead down his throat, and he was executed by Cortes for treason. And his death in 1521 marks the end of the Aztec Empire. Now, Doña Malina was a Nahua woman from the Mexican Gulf Coast who played a key role in this conquering of the Spanish being able to conquer the Aztec. She was an interpreter and she was an intermediary. She was also Cortes's woman slaves or his mistress, okay? And she's also known to have given birth to the first baby of mestizo. I don't agree with that because we had some castaways prior to that, so I think that the castaways probably that. But even in today, as I said before, uh, Doña Malina or La Malinche remains iconically potent. She's understood in various ways, but mostly as a disloyal compatriot, especially in Mexico. Because of her controversial symbolism, statues of her and Cortes and her son Martin have been removed after they were erected in Coyoacan, and uh, they put up the statues to be respectful of the trials that she was in and the dichotomy of being a mestizo. Were you born out of rape? Were you born out of conquest? Were you born out of love? That whole idea. But for most part, Mexicans did not want it, and they see her as somebody that betrayed uh, the Aztec, and they want nothing to do with her. Okay, the Aztec were bilateral family units, which is a lot like we have now. Bilateral means that when you marry, then you are now part of two families, right? They have no intermarriage between caste groups, and that's even now. I remember when I was young, uh, I had a girlfriend whose parents would say that she could not go out with me because I was beneath her. Uh, Most of these marriages can go down if the Spaniard, chooses a female native indigenous, but a male indigenous cannot pick a Spanish male. It That's also very common in Anglo American culture. Okay, uh, and there was a rise of nobility and the idea to get as much Spanish blood as you could in you, so you could how can I say it? You could elevate yourself caste wise. Okay, agriculture and sustenance. They built the chinampas, the floating gardens, which are really cool, artificial islands that were all piled up together, constant water and irrigation, very fertile. They grew corn, squash, beans, amaranth, and spirulina. Remember, I told you about that algae, that green algae that they would gather and make into like a cheese. 1 acre chinampa, a 1 acre chinampa or chinampa that's 1 square block, could feed 20 people for 1 year. Okay, and yield 7 crops annually. So that's pretty effective. 20 people can feed themselves out of one plot of land. Um, there is some speculation that they used to use human excrement as fertilization. They basically would just let it float into the water and it would decompose. But I don't know exactly the process and how they would process the human fecal matter to use as fertilizer. But I do know that they were smart enough to know that they couldn't use it, as it came out of the human body, that it had to be decomposed to an extent. Though they were very intensive agriculturally, they urbanized and they used the lake as a rich source of protein of aquatic animals such as fish, amphibians, shrimp, freshwater shrimp, insects, insect eggs, which are very high in protein, and waterfowl, birds. So they had a varied source of proteins. They also kept turkeys and dogs that they ate at times, and they um, historical scholars say that there was never a shortage of protein in the inhabitants of the Valley of Mexico. There was a suspicion that they sometimes would consume the bodies that they would sacrifice, and this was done because there were so many sacrifices. Okay, so as we know of in the Americas, the only tribe that practiced dietary cannibalism were the Aztec. Now, the Gran Templo, the centerpiece of Tenochtitlan, is a double staircase pyramid where the sacrifices would take place. It seemed that all power was contained and concentrated there. It's pretty much near the Zócalo, very close to the Zócalo, in La Basilica de Guadalupe in Mexico City. It unearthed actually recently. There's still some excavation going on there at the time, but it is within eyes view of that place. And what the Spanish would do is that they would find something that meant a lot to the Aztec, and they would build something that was Christian on top of it. Okay, and thus giving life to now a Christian life, a rebirth. I have some pictures of the model of the Templo Mayor, uh, and then I also have some pictures of course, the Zócalo, which is a big open area in front of La Basilica de Guadalupe, and that's where the Mexican flag is. Aztec religion was pretty cool. Okay, it was. It was based on a calendar, a ritual. They were polytheistic. That means that they had a lot of gods. They were central to a religion was sacrifice, and the sacrifice was thanking for continued life cycle. You have Tlaloc for rain, Quetzalcoatl for the wind, Huitzilopochtli for the sun, Tezcatlipoca for night, Tlatecuili for female deity for the earth, and I can never say this one, Mictlantlecuili. Okay, and I know everybody's going to say he said it wrong, but it's that was the equivalent of the devil, the death, the underworld deity. Explanations of the origins varied. Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca were at the center, or friends, allowing humans to flourish on Earth in exchange for blood sacrifices. Another story is that a bone grinder was used, and then the god used his blood to infuse a bone and gave rise to the Aztec. The Mexica believed that their primary god was Huitzilopochtli, which was a very violent god, and their story is a lot like Cain and Abel. It's the whole Cain and Abel deal. The Aztec had a 260-day ritual calendar and a 365-day solar calendar. and every 52 years they met. It was like two wheels, the 360 and the 260 the 260 and the 365 were going in, I would say, in opposite directions, but they were going in opposite directions, but they were going in the same direction. In other words, they were dialing in opposite directions, but they were going in the same direction. And every 52 years, they would meet at the starting point. Thus, they would start all over again. And there was a big sacrifice, and turn off all the flames, and the runners would bring the new fire and start everything again, all over again. All right. As I said before, there's a section there for human sacrifice and cannibalism. Uh, Reasons for sacrifice. Well, I just told you that they had an abundance of protein, but now they're sacrificing because they needed protein. I really can't tell you why. I do know that the issue of sacrifice is sometimes blown out of proportion. I actually did the math one time on, Walter Prescott Webb said that this many people were being sacrificed every day, and I did the calculation and I broke it down, and it was something like 7 people a second had to be sacrificed every day to sacrifice that many people. 7 people a second had to be sacrificed every day, uh, 365 days a year in order to sacrifice as many people as Walter Prescott Webb said he had to. The decline of the Aztec, of course, is going to be because of Cortes. There's no ifs, ands, or but about that. Epidemics, viruses, and then, of course, the Spanish population intermarrying with the Aztec, and then it just kind of faded off. By 1576, it's pretty much a done deal. Now, population numbers vary between 200,000 to 30 million. I say more like 8 to 10 million prior to contact. Um, you know, so I don't know, what is the lasting identity and lasting legacy of the Aztec? Well, that's the only tribe that we really hang on to, that we really look at. We don't look at the Maya. We don't look at the Mixtec or the Zapotec or, Totonacas, which are still around. I think it would be safe to say that it is more likely for you to find your roots to be a Mixtec than you would to find your roots if you were an Aztec, because of the impact that the Spaniards had on the Aztec and how diffused they became, whether as the Mixtec or the Zapotec or Olmecas or Maya. They remained. The Spanish did not make inroads into those areas as hard as they did into the Valley of Mexico. So that means that chances are that it'll be easier for you to find out if you had, of course, Zapotec or Mixtec or, you know, Maya blood. The Mayas still flourish in Mexico at this time, in Mexico and Central America. That's something to be said. The deal is that the Aztec story is the easiest to trace because it's the one that's closest to us time wise, and it's actually pretty vibrant. And it's very warrior like, kind of like the whole Black Panther kind of uh, in your face warrior kind of deal. So that's why it's easier to hold on to. And it's also more romantic. The fact that Moctezuma and Cuauhtemoc resisted so much after being tortured and all the above, that kind of makes it more, it gives it more substance. Okay. So this concludes our lecture, and exams coming soon. Uh, Probably this time next week it will open. Again, I apologize for being kind of sleepy today, but it's not, it's cold outside, and yeah, I have a little jacket on, and if I take it off, I'm cold. If I put it on, I'm kind of warm. So, kind of, it's kind of like the time to go sit in my chair back there and take a nap, right? Even though I just woke up a couple of hours ago. But I hope you enjoyed the lectures. And again, I apologize for my lack of enthusiasm on this last one. But I have my good days and my bad days. Okay, you all take care and thanks for watching. And make sure that you like the video and maybe subscribe to my channel and check out some of my other stuff. Again, these views are solely mine. The views expressed in this video are mine, and they're not those of Tarrant County College or anybody else that works there. These are my views and my views only. Thank you so much, and you all have a great day. Be safe and wear your masks. And more than anything else, be kind to each other. Bye bye.